The man who never existed, CIA's most mysterious double agent in the dimly lit corridors of Langley. A quiet tension hung in the air as analysts sifted through layers of intercepted communications. Every day, the CIA faced the challenge of identifying threats that didn't even appear on conventional radars. Whispers of operatives whose very existence was in question. Among these shadows, one non-name began to surface. A phantom in the records, slipping through official files as if it had never been there. The intelligence team, seasoned in deception and counterintelligence, could feel the subtle tremor of unease as they pieced together fragments of coded messages, each hinting at an agent who might not officially exist. Analysts cross-referenced internal documents and foreign communications, finding a trail of inconsistencies that pointed to a deliberate erasure. No personnel file, no photograph, no authorized mention, yet the operational footprints were undeniable. Every intercepted signal carried the echo of someone moving in and out of secure channels, someone whose actions had tangible consequences despite their supposed invisibility. The CIA officers understood they were dealing with a master of shadows, an agent trained to vanish not only from sight, but from the very architecture of intelligence itself. The whispers became patterns, the patterns became suspicions, and suspicions demanded action. In the war of information, the agency recognized the delicate balance between observation and intervention. Too much attention could alert this invisible operative, yet too little could allow them to slip further into a network of clandestine influence. Strategists convened behind closed doors, debating the nature of an adversary who might not even be real, yet whose maneuvers suggested a deeply embedded double life, a puzzle crafted with meticulous care. In these early days of discovery, the shadow agent's existence was a hypothesis, yet every calculated move and carefully planted misdirection suggested a mind operating with surgical precision. Cryptographers labored over encoded transmissions, attempting to unravel patterns in seemingly meaningless sequences, while field operatives traced contacts whose identities dissolved into ambiguity. The sense of watching an invisible chess master at play heightened the tension, each revelation leading to more questions than answers, each decoded message revealing the ghostly fingerprints of someone who is always one step ahead. As night fell over Washington, the city's lights flickered against the windows of secure offices, reflecting a labyrinthine dance of secrets and deception. Analysts could only imagine the life of this phantom operative, one who might be sitting in a safe house across the globe, orchestrating events that no one could attribute to them. The very concept of existence was challenged. The line between reality and fabrication blurred in every intercepted message and clandestine meeting. And as the clock ticked toward midnight, a new understanding emerged among the intelligence circle. They were not just hunting an agent, they were confronting a question of identity itself, a man who might never have existed. The shadow begins, yet the first glimpses of this invisible adversary hinted at a far more intricate and dangerous game, one that would stretch across continents and challenge every assumption about loyalty, identity, and the fragile architecture of espionage itself. The pieces were moving, the invisible hand guiding them. And the CIA had only just begun to see the outline of a man who left no trace yet changed everything. The pieces were moving, the invisible hand guiding them, and the CIA had only just begun to see the outline of a man who left no trace yet changed everything. Analysts returned to the archives, poring over decades of intelligence reports, searching for discrepancies that might reveal the ghost's origin. Every personnel file, every mission report, and every declassified cable was scrutinized for anomalies. Dates that didn't align, signatures that seemed forged, and references that vanished when Tracy were chasing a phantom who had been meticulous in erasing himself from official history. The deeper they dug, the more questions emerged. There were whispers in the corridors about operations that never officially occurred and contacts that appeared only in fragmented communications. Each new lead hinted at a life lived in shadows. a network of covert activities stretching across continents, yet leaving no tangible proof. Officers debated whether the ghost was a single individual or a carefully orchestrated legend maintained by a team of operatives. A living myth designed to manipulate and confuse. Cryptographers uncovered patterns hidden within routine transmissions, subtle markers that suggested deliberate misdirection. Field agents recounted encounters with informants whose stories were inconsistent, details that changed with every retelling, yet somehow aligned with other fragments of intelligence. Every thread pulled seemed to unravel a web of deception far more intricate than anyone had anticipated. It was as if the ghost existed in parallel realities, each carefully constructed to obscure the truth. A sudden breakthrough came when a seemingly insignificant document buried in an old archive contained references that matched signals intercepted years earlier. Analysts realized that these small traces were deliberate breadcrumbs, leading them on a chase that tested their patience and intellect. Each discovery revealed the sophistication of a mind that had mastered the art of disappearing. A life lived in deliberate contradiction to every record, every expectation, and every witness. The CIA's understanding of the ghost began to shift from mere speculation to a tangible operational presence. He was no longer an abstract concept. His influence on global events, covert operations, and intelligence networks was undeniable. Yet the question remained, who was he, and how could someone operate at such a level of invisibility? Every answer seemed to spawn more questions, each pointing toward a larger, more dangerous reality where truth and fabrication were inseparable. As dawn approached, the analysts felt both exhilarated and uneasy. The investigation was no longer about discovering an agent's hit, had become a race to understand a presence that had manipulated systems, people, and histories without ever revealing itself. The lines between myth and reality blurred further, and the CIA was now confronting the unsettling possibility that this ghost was orchestrating events from behind a veil of perfect secrecy. The hunt had only just begun, but the stakes were already impossibly high. The lines between myth and reality blurred further, and the CIA was now confronting the unsettling possibility that this ghost was orchestrating events from behind a veil of perfect secrecy. Every lead, every decrypted message, every minor anomaly in the archives pointed to the existence of a man whose life was compartmentalized to an extraordinary degree. From one world, he was a loyal operative and trusted with missions that shaped international relations, and in another, he seemed to vanish completely, leaving no paper trail, no financial record, and no personal imprint that could anchor him in reality. Analysts struggled to reconcile the duality, realizing that they were facing a person capable of living multiple lives simultaneously, each meticulously maintained and entirely plausible, yet none verifiable. Field operatives recalled encounters with a mysterious informant who appeared in different cities under different identities, offering intelligence that always proved accurate yet was delivered with a subtle ambiguity. He would arrive in one country, vanish for months, then resurface in a distant location, seamlessly integrated into local society as if he had always belonged. These carefully orchestrated appearances suggested a discipline and training beyond normal parameters, a capacity to manipulate both human perception and institutional systems without leaving any trace. The CIA began mapping his movements, trying to connect dots that often refused to align, realizing that every footprint he left was deliberately misleading. Inside the agency, a special task force was formed to study the patterns of this double life. Analysts examined his communications, his contacts, and the operational impacts of missions attributed to him. What became evident was a mind that was not only skilled in espionage, but also in controlling narratives, crafting realities, and erasing histories. Each layer of deception required meticulous planning, and even when a thread seemed within reach, it would dissolve under scrutiny, leading to new mysteries. The man's dual existence was a masterclass in operational stealth, where the person who executed orders might not even be the one observed by his own colleagues. Cryptography teams noted inconsistencies in encoded transmissions, subtle variations that indicated either deliberate obfuscation or the actions of multiple individuals working in unison. Analysts debated endlessly whether the ghost was a single agent or a networked identity, a role played by different people under one constructed persona. Field reports suggested encounters with informants and operatives whose descriptions conflicted, each version consistent with the same unique skill set, reinforcing the myth of a singular agent whose reality was constantly reinvented. The double life extended to the highest levels of operational secrecy, encompassing every element of his existence: location, identity, contacts, and even personal history. The complexity deepened when the task force discovered evidence of missions in which no authorized orders existed. Operations had been carried out successfully, outcomes achieved, yet the official chain of command bore no record. It was as if the ghost operated independently, creating actions that had measurable effects but could not be traced to a real individual. Analysts realized they were not merely chasing a missing person. They were tracking a carefully engineered illusion, a man whose life was divided into layers invisible to conventional intelligence methods. Every discovery challenged the assumptions of loyalty, accountability, and operational reality, forcing the CIA to rethink not just their investigative approach, but the very definition of an agent. As months passed, the intelligence community began to understand that the double life was not just a strategiate, was a philosophy of existence. The ghost had mastered the art of living simultaneously in parallel realities, influencing outcomes, shaping perceptions, and erasing evidence of his presence. Each time the agency thought they had cornered him, new data appeared, consistent with someone who anticipated every move, someone who had designed his own invisibility. Analysts began to consider that he had no personal history, no conventional identity, existing solely as a function of operations, decisions, and strategic influence, a living entity whose entire being was defined by the missions he undertook and the lies he left behind. Late one night, a breakthrough emerged when a pattern was identified connecting seemingly unrelated operations across Europe and the Middle East. Analysts saw the signature of his actions, a sequence of choices that no ordinary operative could have anticipated, leaving a trail invisible to anyone but those trained to see the faintest irregularities. This revelation confirmed that the double life was not only real, but central to his effectiveness, enabling him to act in ways that were unpredictable, untraceable, and devastatingly precise. The ghost was no longer a rumor, no longer a theory, he was a force. A shadow moving through the intelligence landscape with purpose, precision, and absolute invisibility. And as the task force pieced together these fragments, a chilling realization settled over the agency. The man they were hunting had created himself as a perfect enigma, a double existence, so complete that he challenged the very framework of human understanding. Every attempt to define him, to locate him, or to understand him resulted in deeper uncertainty. The double life nobody saw was now fully visible to those who had the patience and insight to follow the subtle threads. Yet even then, the ghost remained untouchable, an operative whose legacy was defined as much by absence as by action, whose existence forced the CIA to confront the paradox of a man who could be everywhere and nowhere at once, shaping events without ever revealing his true identity. The double life nobody saw was now fully visible to those who had the patience and insight to follow the subtle threads. Yet even then, the ghost remained untouchable, an operative whose legacy was defined as much by absence as by action, whose existence forced the CIA to confront the paradox of a man who could be everywhere and nowhere at once, shaping events without ever revealing his true identity. As the agency adjusted to the reality of this elusive figure, new challenges emerged, patterns of communication that defied conventional surveillance, signals embedded within seemingly mundane transmissions, and messages concealed in the shadows of ordinary operations. Analysts realized that the ghost was not merely a physical presence. He existed in the very structure of information itself, moving through networks, influencing decisions, and leaving digital fingerprints so subtle they could easily be mistaken for noise. Each intercepted signal required painstaking decryption, and even then, the meaning was often layered with deliberate ambiguity. The operative had mastered a language of shadows, encoding instructions in ways that only those intimately familiar with his methods could hope to interpret. Field agents received vague directives with precision timing, and the results were always remarkable. Operations that seemed spontaneous or coincidental were revealed to be carefully orchestrated, linked by invisible threads of planning that spanned continents and months. Every success reinforced the notion that they were dealing with someone operating above, beyond, and outside conventional intelligence protocols. The task force began analyzing anomalies in satellite communications, encrypted messages, and diplomatic correspondences. Signals that had previously been dismissed as background static now revealed themselves as markers, subtle indicators of presence and intention. Analysts discovered patterns in timing, phrasing, and sequence, each a signature left by the ghost to assert control without exposure. Even attempts to trace him electronically were complicated by layers of misdirection, rerouted networks, and deliberately corrupted metadata. It was a digital choreography, a dance in which every step was calculated to remain invisible, yet influential. Field officers encountered informants whose accounts contained contradictions, yet each discrepancy formed part of a coherent whole when viewed from the perspective of the operative's strategy. The ghost's signals had an almost preternatural quality, anticipating countermeasures, predicting agency responses, and remaining a step ahead in every scenario. Operations that seemed unconnected were suddenly seen as threads of a larger, unseen plan, revealing a mind that combined strategic brilliance with surgical precision in execution. No conventional profiling could account for the breadth of his influence, the sophistication of his communications, or the meticulousness with which he avoided detection. The deeper the CIA delved into these shadow signals, the more they realized the ghost had established a presence that transcended geography. He was embedded in organizations, subtly directing actions, creating outcomes that advanced objectives while leaving the illusion of randomness intact. Analysts faced a profound challenge: how to respond to someone who existed in every network but could not be caught, whose influence was measurable, yet whose identity was perpetually concealed. It was not just an operational problem, it was a fundamental test of the agency's understanding of intelligence itself. Late one evening, a breakthrough came when cross-referencing multiple communications exposed a pattern invisible to the naked eye, a sequence of seemingly unconnected events across Europe, Asia, and the Americas aligned perfectly with the ghost's known operational signature. Analysts realized that even as they studied the signals, they were participating in a framework the ghost had constructed, moving exactly as he intended. Every decrypted message, every traced contact, every piece of corroborating evidence was part of a living map of his orchestration. It's a complex lattice that proved he was not merely hiding, he was directing, guiding, baiting, and manipulating the flow of global intelligence without ever stepping into the light. By dawn, the agency understood that the ghost's mastery of signals, both visible and concealed, represented a level of operational sophistication unparalleled in modern espionage. The task force had not merely uncovered communications, they had glimpsed the architecture of a mind that could exist across dimensions of secrecy, a life woven into the fabric of intelligence itself. And as the sun rose over Washington, the realization settled. They were no longer simply tracking an invisible agent. They were deciphering a presence that reshaped the rules of observation, control, and reality itself. A figure whose every signal in the dark carried consequences that would reverberate across the world, unseen yet unstoppable. By dawn, the agency understood that the ghost's mastery of signals, both visible and concealed, represented a level of operational sophistication unparalleled in modern espionage. The task force had not merely uncovered communications, they had glimpsed the architecture of a mind that could exist across dimensions of secrecy, a life woven into the fabric of intelligence itself. Yet even with all their discoveries, a fundamental question remained. Who was he? And the answer seemed to slip further into obscurity with each lead. Every identity attributed to him dissolved under scrutiny, leaving a vacuum where a name, a face, or a personal history should have been. The identity that never existed had become the central enigma of the investigation, a paradox that challenged every assumption about what an operative could be. Analysts reviewed operational files and personal dossiers, expecting to find traces of background, affiliations, or even small inconsistencies that might reveal a person behind the legend. What they discovered instead was absence complete, deliberate, and consistent. Each record seemed intentionally sanitized, every interaction documented only in coded references or fleeting reports. Even his colleagues in the field could not reconcile their memories. Encounters were fleeting, descriptions varied, and accounts of his presence contradicted one another in ways that suggested a man constantly reinventing himself. Every attempt to define him in concrete terms failed, leaving the agency to confront the impossible notion of a professional existence entirely decoupled from verifiable identity. The Ghost's operational footprint was vast. Missions executed under his guidance achieved extraordinary outcomes, yet no authorization forms, no signatories, no official acknowledgement ever existed. The chain of command appeared unaware of his actions, yet results could not be denied. Analysts began to realize that the operative had mastered not only invisibility but also autonomy, conducting operations with the precision of a fully integrated agent while remaining formally non-existent. The paradox of his identity struck at the core of the CIA's understanding of accountability, command, and trust. How could an agency reconcile the presence of someone whose actions influenced global events yet left no trace in the official hierarchy? Cryptographers uncovered subtle patterns in coded communications, indications of a persona constructed deliberately to evade detection. The operative's signature's minute variations in transmission timing, phrasing, and encryption methods served as markers of authenticity for those trained to recognize them, yet remained invisible to conventional observation. Analysts saw the genius of a mind capable of simultaneously living in multiple realities, each identity plausible, each appearance consistent with operational needs, and none verifiable through ordinary methods. He had become a ghost, not just in existence, but in function a being whose professional life existed entirely as an abstraction, defined by influence rather than form. Field agents recounted experiences that defied explanation. An operative would meet informants, receive precise intelligence, and vanish before anyone could formally record his presence. Descriptions of him fluctuated with every retelling, yet each version aligned with outcomes that could be objectively verified. It was as if the man existed only as a series of actions, a living protocol of intelligence, rather than a person with a personal history. Even when glimpsed in person, he remained enigmatic, blending seamlessly into his environment, leaving no imprint on memory beyond a faint impression of capability and control. The task force confronted an unsettling reality. This man's non-existence was not a flaw, a disguise, or an oversight. It was an operational strategy. By erasing himself from records, from perception, and from history, he gained freedom to act without constraint, influence outcomes without attribution, and maneuver through the intelligence landscape without detection. His identity was a void, yet within that void existed unparalleled agency, autonomy, and precision. Analysts were forced to reconsider the very definition of an operative, realizing that the Ghost had created a methodology of being that rendered traditional intelligence metrics meaningless. As weeks turned into months, patterns emerged connecting past operations, communications, and field reports in ways that confirmed a singular intelligence architect behind them all. This revelation highlighted the enormity of the challenge. The identity that never existed was not simply a cloak for actions, but a foundational principle of operational genius. allowing him to operate with impunity, influence decisions across multiple theaters, and remain untouchable in every conceivable way. And as the CIA pieced together these fragments, the chilling understanding set in that the man behind the double life had transcended conventional human identity, existing instead as a force that shaped events, manipulated perceptions, and navigated reality with complete autonomy. A presence that could be everywhere and nowhere, known and unknown, all at once. And as the CIA pieced together these fragments, the chilling understanding set in that the man behind the double life had transcended conventional human identity, existing instead as a force that shaped events, manipulated perceptions, and navigated reality with complete autonomy. A presence that could be everywhere and nowhere, known and unknown, all at once. Yet even as analysts tried to comprehend the scope of his existence, another challenge emerged, a carefully constructed trap embedded within the very truths they sought to uncover. Each revelation about his movements, communications, and operations seemed authentic, yet carried the subtle imprint of deliberate deception. It became increasingly clear that every piece of intelligence could be both genuine and false, a duality designed to mislead even the most skilled operatives. The task force began to map his influence, tracing connections that spanned continents and decades. They discovered that every operational success attributed to conventional means had in fact been subtly orchestrated by the Ghost, who anticipated the agency's investigative processes and manipulated outcomes to suit his designs. Field reports, intercepted messages, and archival documents were all woven together into a labyrinthine pattern, each thread carefully placed to shape perception, encourage assumptions, and guide analysts toward conclusions that were both accurate and misleading. The CIA realized that they were navigating a terrain where reality and fabrication coexisted, a puzzle whose pieces could never be fully trusted. As the days turned into weeks, the task force identified a recurring motif in the Ghost's operations, an uncanny ability to predict the agency's reactions. When a lead was followed, a countermeasure was already in place. When analysts deduced a pattern, the operative had anticipated it, leaving behind breadcrumbs that would reinforce a particular narrative while concealing the deeper truth. It was a game of intellectual chess in which every move was countered before it was made. A trap constructed not of walls or bars, but of knowledge itself. Each revelation became a test of discernment, forcing analysts to question not only the information they received, but also their own assumptions, biases, and methodologies. The Ghost's mastery of deception extended beyond mere operational security. He manipulated timing, context, and perception with surgical precision, ensuring that every interaction, whether with informants, agents, or digital networks, advanced his objectives while remaining invisible. Even the patterns of absence, the gaps in records, the missing signatures, the vanished identities were themselves carefully engineered signals, markers of control and influence. Analysts came to understand that to pursue the truth was to walk through a hall of mirrors, where every reflection contained partial truths and calculated distortions, and where the act of observation itself could be manipulated to mislead. In one critical instance, the task force traced a series of communications that appeared to confirm the operative's presence in a European city, only to discover that the messages had been routed through multiple nodes and deliberately altered to suggest a different timeline. By the time analysts pieced together the fragments, they realized they had been led into a false sequence, a trap that validated the Ghost's existence while concealing his actual location and intentions. It was a revelation that crystallized the central dilemma. To pursue the Ghost was to be perpetually ensnared in the tension between what was real and what was orchestrated. And yet, to act without this knowledge risked inaction, missed opportunities, and operational failure. The agency recognized that the trap behind the truth was not merely a defensive strategy. It was an offensive one, designed to control perception, shape narratives, and influence decision-making at every level. Analysts had to develop new frameworks, new methods of reasoning, and unprecedented caution in interpreting evidence. Every decrypted message, every field report, meant every archival document could contain layers of manipulation, a carefully placed ambiguity that challenged the very foundations of intelligence analysis. It was a mental battlefield, a war fought in the subtle spaces between certainty and doubt, visibility and invisibility. By the time the task force convened for a high-level briefing, the enormity of the Ghost's strategy was undeniable. He had constructed a reality in which his actions could be observed yet never fully traced, his influence measurable yet his presence unconfirmable. The trap was not in a physical space, nor in a particular operation, but in the very process of seeking truth itself. To confront him was to navigate a world where knowledge was both weapon and cage, where every discovery carried the risk of deception, and where the act of understanding could be as treacherous as ignorance. And as the team absorbed this reality, the haunting conclusion became inescapable. The Ghost had created a labyrinth of truth and lies so intricate that even those with the highest clearance and deepest expertise could never fully escape its design. The trap was not in a physical space, nor in a particular operation, but in the very process of seeking truth itself. To confront him was to navigate a world where knowledge was both weapon and cage, where every discovery carried the risk of deception, and where the act of understanding could be as treacherous as ignorance. And as the team absorbed this reality, the haunting conclusion became inescapable. The Ghost had created a labyrinth of truth and lies so intricate that even those with the highest ease, clearance, and deepest expertise could never fully escape its design. Yet, in the midst of these complexities, one final truth emerged: his influence was enduring, his presence intangible, and his existence both real and unreal, echoing across the operations he touched without ever being directly observed. Every operation traced back to the Ghost revealed layers of ingenuity and forethought that surpassed conventional comprehension. Analysts mapped the results of covert missions, noting how decisions in Washington were subtly guided by imperceptible nudges, communications routed through a chain of intermediaries, and precise timing that manipulated outcomes without leaving direct attribution. The operative had perfected the art of invisibility, leaving behind a trail of actions that could be measured, studied, and interpreted, yet never linked to a singular, confirmable identity. His legacy was one of results, influence, and absence of paradox that challenged the very definition of agency and accountability. Field operatives recounted moments when the Ghost appeared to be simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, delivering intelligence in ways that defied explanation, vanishing before any formal recognition could occur. His fingerprints were left in operations across continents, yet when investigators sought concrete proof of his presence, they encountered carefully orchestrated voids. Even the most seasoned officers could not claim certainty about the man's motives, affiliations, or even his existence. And in that uncertainty lay the genius of his methodology. He existed entirely through his impact, shaping events invisibly while remaining untouchable. The task force realized that to study him was to accept a paradox. Every insight gained was accompanied by a new set of uncertainties. Every pattern observed could be part of a larger misdirection, and every confirmation of his influence reinforced the impossibility of fully understanding him. Analysts developed new frameworks to operate within this uncertainty, balancing the need for actionable intelligence with the acceptance of inevitable ambiguity. The Ghost had created a world in which observation itself became a tool of manipulation, a domain where knowledge and doubt were inseparable companions. As the final phase of the investigation unfolded, a consensus emerged. The operative's story was not merely one of espionage or intelligence, it was a testament to the limits of perception, the art of deception, and the extraordinary possibilities of human ingenuity. The man who never existed had rewritten the rules of engagement, demonstrating that influence, impact, and strategy could transcend the boundaries of identity itself. His presence, though invisible, had altered the course of missions, decisions, and lives, leaving echoes that would resonate within the CIA for decades. And as the task force compiled their final report, a message for the wider audience became clear. The lessons of the ghost were not just for operatives in the field, they were for anyone who seeks to understand the subtle interplay of information, deception, and human decision-making. In a world where appearances can be deceiving, where truth is layered and complex, vigilance, analysis, and critical thinking are paramount. This story invites viewers to reflect on the invisible forces shaping the narratives around them, and to consider how perception, influence, and reality are often intertwined in ways unseen. Before we conclude, we encourage you, our viewers, to engage with us. Comment below and let us know where you are watching from. Share your thoughts on the ghost's extraordinary abilities, and subscribe to stay updated with more stories that explore the shadowy world of intelligence. Each story is carefully researched, cinematic in presentation, and based on historical and factual records wherever possible, designed to entertain, inform, and inspire curiosity without passing moral or political judgment. Disclaimer: the story of the man who never existed is based on declassified records, investigative reporting, and expert analysis. Some events, names, and identities may be fictionalized to protect sensitive information or to ensure narrative clarity. This content is intended for informational and documentary purposes only, and does not represent any official stance or opinion. In Langley, a quiet tension filled the corridors as analysts sifted through intercepted communications. Whispers of an operative whose existence was uncertain began to surface, a phantom slipping through official files. Every intercepted signal carried the echo of someone moving unseen, leaving tangible consequences despite invisibility. Analysts traced internal documents and foreign communications, noticing deliberate gaps. No personnel file, no photograph. Yet operational footprints were undeniable. The CIA realized they were chasing a master of shadows, an agent trained to vanish from sight and records alike. Patterns emerged, suspicions grew, and the agency debated the delicate balance between observation and intervention. Cryptographers labored to decode transmissions while field operatives tracked ambiguous contacts. Each move hinted at a mind operating with precise, invisible strategy, always one step ahead. As night fell, Washington's lights flickered against secure windows. Analysts imagined the phantom operative orchestrating events across the globe. Existence itself seemed challenged. The line between reality and fabrication blurred. They were not hunting an agent. They were confronting a question of identity. Archival research revealed anomaly states that didn't align, forged signatures, vanished references. Operations that never officially occurred, contacts only in fragmented communications. Analysts debated whether this ghost was a single operative or a crafted legend. A living myth manipulating reality. Cryptographers discovered subtle markers of misdirection. Field agents encountered informants with inconsistent stories, yet fragments aligned. Each thread unraveled a web of deception, as if the ghost existed in parallel realities, each designed to obscure truth. A breakthrough appeared in old archives, linking signals from years prior. Analysts realized the ghost left deliberate breadcrumbs, a mind-mastering disappearance, living in contradiction to every record. Influence on global operations became undeniable, yet identity remained a question. Over months, the CIA recognized the ghost's philosophy, living in multiple realities, shaping perceptions, erasing evidence. Each time they thought he was cornered, new data emerged. The operative's identity was no history, no name, only function and entity defined by missions and lies left behind. A pattern emerged across Europe and the Middle East, choices no ordinary operative could predict. The ghost's double life was central to his effectiveness, acting unpredictably, untraceably, and precisely. He was no rumor, no theory. He was a force in the intelligence landscape. By dawn, Mastery of signals and concealed operations revealed an unprecedented operational mind. Yet, identity remained obscured, each lead dissolving under scrutiny. Missions achieved extraordinary outcomes without authorization, proving autonomy and invisibility as strategy. Field reports recounted fleeting encounters. Intelligence delivered, vanishing before documentation. Descriptions fluctuated, yet outcomes verified. The ghost existed as a series of actions, a living protocol of intelligence, blending seamlessly while leaving no personal imprint. CIA pieced together fragments. The man had transcended conventional identity, acting everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Every revelation carried subtle deception, creating duality in intelligence. Analysts mapped influence spanning decades, recognizing outcomes subtly orchestrated to suit his designs. Mastery extended to timing, context, and perception. Every gap in records, missing signature, vanished identity was a signal. Pursuing truth became a hall of mirrors where observation itself could mislead. The ghost controlled reality through perception and subtle manipulation. High-level briefings confirmed the enormity of his strategy. Influence measurable, presence unconfirmable. The trap was in seeking truth itself. Every operation revealed layers of ingenuity, each decision subtly guided, outcomes manipulated, leaving a legacy of influence without identity. Field operatives observed simultaneous presence and absence. Evidence existed, yet remained unattainable. The ghost shaped events entirely through impact, untouchable, redefining operational possibilities and the limits of understanding in intelligence. The task force accepted paradox, every insight paired with uncertainty. Patterns could mislead, confirmations could deceive. Analysts adapted, operating within ambiguity, recognizing observation as a tool of manipulation. The ghost created a reality where knowledge and doubt were inseparable. In the final investigation, consensus emerged. This operative story was beyond espionage. It was a study of perception, deception, and human ingenuity. Influence, impact, and strategy transcended identity. Presence, though invisible, altered missions, decisions, and lives, leaving echoes lasting decades. Viewers are invited to reflect on invisible forces shaping narratives, the subtle interplay of information and deception, and the extraordinary skill required to operate unseen. Comment your thoughts, share your location, and subscribe for more cinematic spy stories. Disclaimer: based on declassified records, research, and expert analysis. Some names, events, or identities may be fictionalized for narrative clarity. For informational and documentary purposes only.